Okie dokie. Laura, good morning. How are you?
Hey Ken, so funny because it's actually night here, but good morning to you. Good evening to me.
Yeah. We're feeling like collaborating all from different parts of the globe, so it's good that we're able to join up and do this together. Um, I think really what I'm looking forward to most talking about this topic with you is just the fact that we both have had experience with this. Well, we both had experience with polyamory and open relationships, so I think that'll be really exciting. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and also your experience with open relationships?
Yeah, sure. I guess just to start, a little bit about me. My name's Laura. I'm at Kissed and Dismissed here on Instagram. I'm a dating coach that specializes in online dating, specifically optimizing your profile and really nailing your messaging strategy. I do a little bit of the mindset work beforehand, a little bit of the transition after, but really, I'm a marketer. That's kind of where my professional background is. So, especially in copywriting. So, I think that's where I like to
Mm,
focus a lot is kind of how you're presenting yourself through your profile and your messages. But I'm really passionate about the topic of open relationships and polyamory because it's something that I never really had a lot of exposure to until the last few years. And I actually was in a polyamorous, I was in two different polyamorous relationships. And before that, it was something that wasn't even on my consciousness. I talked a little bit with you about this, Ken, when we were talking about what we were going to discuss today. And I think something that really strikes me is that your whole life, really growing up in school, all you're really taught about relationships is like, it should be between a man and a woman, and you should be striving for monogamy and marriage. And it's just really
mm,
upsetting because there's a huge spectrum of relationships and no one's really educated on them. So I think it's a really important topic to discuss maybe, you know, who it works for, who it doesn't, maybe the benefits of it, because I think a lot of people don't, they automatically assume because of that programming their whole life, if you're supposed to be in this monogamous relationship, they're very resistant to it. Even open-minded people, like I consider myself open-minded, and when I first was confronted with this, I was like, oh no, I don't think that would be for me. And then
yeah.
when I was actually in a relationship like that, I really, it's funny, I had two different experiences. I'll go a little bit into it, but basically, the first time around, I met a guy who was in a polyamorous relationship already. He'd been with his girlfriend for a number of years, but they were open. And I was kind of that other person. And that actually worked really well. It wasn't problematic for me at all, I think, because I kind of realized this guy wasn't suited for a relationship with me, but we got along really well. And I liked
Mm,
his girlfriend, and all of us kind of, it was very honest and open, and it just worked well for like the time that it lasted. Versus more recently, I started seeing a guy, and we were only seeing each other, but we both were kind of like, let's try to be polyamorous. And that didn't really work for me at all. Like, whenever he kind of talked about potentially seeing someone else, I felt that I was getting very jealous. And it just didn't really quite feel right to me. So I thought that was really interesting that kind of when I wasn't in the core relationship, and there's a lot of different ways to approach polyamory, right? Like it could even be more of like a throuple situation where all three people are kind of dating. I was both of the experiences I was with were kind of like there was a core relationship and then kind of another person or several other people. And I just found that I was okay with being one of those other people, but I wasn't really okay with being one of those core people. So that was kind of my experience. I guess you talk about kind of what it was like for you to be involved in a polyamorous or
yeah.
open relationship.
Yeah, well, I think maybe just to start off with, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ken Reed. I am a relationship coach specializing for gay men. I help my audience delete their dating apps and to attract open and honest committed partners by boosting their self-esteem and their communication skills. So I, like you, have a marketing background, so go the marketers. We know what we're talking about when it comes to saying the right things, presenting ourselves well. And I would say now, in terms of my own relationship experience, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, open relationships are a very interesting subject for the gay community because, as we mentioned with you, it's a really fascinating topic for us because a lot of gay men you would look at, are very much into the idea of being in an open relationship. I've done one. And I did mine. That was actually my first relationship was an open relationship, and I can tell you the mindset that I was in. me thinking at that time, I was like, I haven't had much relationship experience at all. I don't know if this is going to be my forever guy. I still want to, go out and try more guys. And so, quite frankly, I entered with a single guy's mentality. I came in thinking to myself, oh, well, I don't have to necessarily worry about this guy being my forever guy because I'll probably have, tons more people that I can still interact with and see. And I think that the consequence of that is that, two things happened. One, and it's not traditional at all. Like, I actually did sleep with another guy, but it made me feel weird. Like, it made me feel like, ugh, this doesn't feel really good at all. Like, I remember I messaged my boyfriend at the time and said to him, listen, I'm going to be sleeping with someone else. Is that okay? And I'd only hear back from him in the morning, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. And I remember that reaction just bothered me. I was like, what do you mean? And I just would have preferred it if he'd actually maybe been a bit more involved and a bit more like, okay, well, can we talk about this a bit more? Instead, it was just it felt indifferent. And so that did something inside me, which made me think, do I even want this? And I can only remember feeling a bit of shame, a bit of guilt for being in an open relationship, which was strange because obviously within the terms and conditions of an open relationship, you're supposed to be okay with that. But I wasn't. So, yeah, I think also having done friends with benefits and juggling far too many people, I can honestly say that, one of the things I learned from that experience was the fact that, having more people is just exhausting. Like, it's just, I don't mean to pass a moral judgment on people who want to do open relationships, but what I'd say is from my experience that when it comes to, more than one, the real challenge can be just the amount of energy that you're giving between different people. And it's just like, whoa, like, Jesus Christ. Like, I barely have time for myself, let alone all of you other people as well. And I think the one thing I'd say is you have to be in the right mindset. Like, when I did Friends with Benefits, I was emotionally dead because I just come out of a bad experience with a relationship, and I was just like, whoa, like, I can take this now because, this is the right place to be. But the consequence of that was that towards the end of that period, I would start to feel more romantic and intimate towards my partners. And then I had to consciously go, okay, I need to be realistic. I want something more than just friends with benefits and multiple partners. I really need just one person. So that's my experience with polyamory and also with open relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is so much about that I really resonate with. And I think the main takeaway I have from what you just said is that it's really about whatever your mindset and your intention is at the time. So, I think
Mm.
there's times in your life where maybe you're not looking for something super serious. And if you seem to connect with somebody and they are in a situation like that, it might work for you. I think that's kind of what happened to me the first time around. I met this guy and he actually lived in England. So I was kind of like, I live in Florida for anyone who doesn't know. And I was kind of just like, there's really not much of a future there anyway. I mean, I guess if I go to England and it's so amazing, maybe I'd consider moving there. But like, it kind of
Mm.
felt like just this thing that would exist when I was there. And I think that's why it was really easy for me to just be like, this doesn't feel weird at all because it just was kind of like I wasn't looking for him to be like my everything, you know? Not that anyone should be your everything, but you know what I mean?
No.
I wasn't looking for him to kind of fulfill that significant other role. So I think that's why it worked okay. Versus this other guy more recently, I was single and I think I was very much in the mindset of, okay, I want my next relationship to be serious. I want it to be long term. And
Yeah.
when it started, when we really addressed polyamory there and being open, it was just a little confusing for me. And it did feel kind of tiring. Or I guess really what you're speaking to about what happened when it was funny because I think usually it's the opposite. You would think that
Yeah.
if you slept with somebody else, your partner would get mad. But that's actually the opposite of what happened. You actually felt uncomfortable being the one that was with someone else. And I think it's because your partner was indifferent. And that is like, that's a problem with your ego, not really a problem, but that's like normal human ego. I think everybody, you really do want to be the center of someone's attention, or you want
Mm.
someone, to want like you don't want your attention to be diverted between multiple people. You know, you want your partner to say, no, I want your attention to be on me, not with somebody else. And I think you know, knowing this guy who had been in this long-term relationship and I was with him, I think the reason that it worked really well, and I think they're a very, very healthy couple, and I think that's really what opened my mind to polyamory, was I was like, wow, they seem like so secure. There's no jealousy. I was super cool hanging out with them. It was so normal. And I think it's because they were together for quite a number of years. And the early years, they were not open. So they really built a very solid foundation. And they did have a lot of time where they were just focused on each other. And I think for them, it's unique as well because it's a guy and a girl in the relationship, but the girl is actually bisexual. So sometimes the people that she's with are women. And I think that's another reason why it works for them, because maybe for her, she desires still to be with women, even though she is with a man for a majority of the time. So it gives her that flexibility to do that, and still be in this serious, like, committed companion relationship as well. I don't know. I just thought they have a really great dynamic, and it really opened my mind to the possibility of this is a real thing. And it's really weird that no one really talks about it. And for instance, when I stumbled upon this, you know, and I just happened to meet this guy who you know, talked to me about being part of this relationship, I actually started thinking maybe I'm polyamorous because it didn't seem weird to me. And I actually started thinking, well, how would I meet other polyamorous people? You know, like, how do I know who's polyamorous? Like, I didn't know of an app that was like just for polyamorous people. So I just started looking in South Florida for groups, and there's a meetup group of like 1,000 people. And I'm like, holy, oh my God, there's this many people that are polyamorous in my town. Like, I had no idea because nobody talks about this. It's just like this weird unspoken thing. So that's why I think I'm really passionate about talking about it, getting it out in the open, making it a topic that is not taboo. Because I do think it works for a lot of people, but you have to, it comes back to what you were saying, where it's like, you have to be really in the right mindset. You have to be at the right, it has to be with the two right people. It's got to be, or more. It has to be with everybody on the same page, with honesty, you know, the right point in the relationship to transition to that, to bring in another person or more than one. There's a lot of factors. One thing that I was thinking about, I know in your story a few days ago, you were talking about the attachment styles. And a lot of your audience pulled in the anxious attachment style. And I was thinking about how a polyamorous relationship probably wouldn't be very suitable for somebody with that type of attachment style, just because there would be that uncertainty of potentially someone, you know, going, like, leaving them for the other person. But what I was thinking about was maybe you know, it's not necessarily polyamory, an open relationship, but I was thinking that it would probably be really beneficial for those people to, when they're on a dating app, to be open to dating more than one person at once, rather than zeroing in on somebody that they're talking to and hanging all of their hopes on them. It's really good for them at that point in time to say, you know what, I'm going to date multiple people. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I don't, you know, want to become too focused on something, and then if it falls apart, it really, like, you know, breaks me. So I don't know, I was thinking about that and how it's an interesting dynamic that maybe at the beginning it would work well, but then as it got serious, it might not. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. So I would say, to answer that, I think that from what I've read, and it's different to what I usually say. So I've said in the past, you know, date one for quality time, but keep your, you know, do keep your options open insofar as communicating with other people. The reason I believe that's important is because I think you can quickly filter out an avoidant or someone who's not suitable to be in a relationship. I mean, even if you, okay, so for example, my rule of thumb is you want to know what you want on the first date. You want to be clear as hell. If you don't even have that on your profile, then there's something really, really wrong with your messaging, because you don't want to attract people who don't want what you want. And then you then have to go through the next layer when you meet them the first time, and then they're talking and they're like, well, you know, I had this happen to me recently. I had a guy who said to me, they said, oh, you know, I like the idea of an open relationship, not sure if I'm ready for it, but I could also be ready for a long-term relationship. I mean, that to me just instantly told me they're confused. And I said, okay, well, mate, look, I'm looking for a long-term relationship right now. I'm not looking for an open relationship. But to bring it back to your point, you know, the reason that approach with dating is so important, you know, and just having that quality time on those first couple of dates is because you quickly get rid of those people. So that helps in sort of narrowing down the field. Now, with what I'm hearing from what you're saying, which is, you know, not having your eggs in one basket, I truly do believe it's good for the anxious attached style for one major reason, which is if we think about people who do become anxious when they start to like someone, you know, I know for me, when I like someone, I think about them all the time. I think about, you know, exclusivity with them, especially when I've been seeing and sleeping with them continuously. And if I'm not getting, you know, and if I feel like they're pulling away, I start to go crazy and start to hone in on them specifically. I become like a degenerate gambler, and it's not a particularly good thing for me, at least. So the value of having, you know, more people start, you know, that you can see around. You don't have to sleep with them, but at least just to, you know, see if you kind of like who they are and they're consistent with you. And then I think you actually have the benefit of figuring out who the good person is versus the one who's not consistent. And I always go back to that word. Consistency is the most important thing with this too. And I will say this is even important for an open relationship too, because, you know, it's one thing, like you were saying, you know, you realized in your area, oh, there's so many people who are interested in polyamory. It's one thing to be interested in it and another thing to be good at it. I think that a lot of people, particularly in the gay community, they are interested in the idea of being in an open relationship. But when they're in it, they're like, shit, this is not what I signed up for. You know, typically the way it works is that you'll find that there's a couple who were, you know, together for a while, can be as long as a few months to, you know, a few years, and they decide to open up the relationship. The horror story that usually comes out of this is that they invite a third, and one of the partners will eventually, you know, become attached to the third and then leave the long-term relationship. Now that's worst case scenario horror story. But I think the real challenge for a lot of people who go into these things is they've got to be honest with themselves. They've really got to check in and go, do I want this? Because if you want your partner all to yourself and they then say they want a third person, you've really got to dig deep and go, okay, what's your reason? It's not a moral question. It's not a black and white, like, you're wrong for wanting an open relationship. No, it's more like, you know, if you're the kind of person where actually opening up to have a third person is your way of introducing space, is your way of, you know, maybe making things fresh for you to discover something else, good for you. But if your partner's not on board with that, then you need to have a serious conversation, because it's probably not going to go in that direction. Now, I noticed in the comments, Dalila asked a question, which is, what's the difference between polyamory and an open relationship? In my experience, polyamory, I've used the term to describe someone who maybe would be bisexual. They love everyone, so to speak. What's your distinction between polyamory and open relationships?
Yeah, I think with polyamory versus open relationships, a polyamory is more towards having multiple long-term relationships at the same time versus an open
Mm.
relationship is more you have one stable relationship and maybe, you know, you occasionally have sex with other people, but it's more like short. I think it's more you're open to have like short flings maybe or one night stands. It doesn't have
Mm.
to be a one night stand. It could be someone you know. But I think it's more like there's one solid relationship and there may just be like one-offs. You're open to have these one-off experiences versus when I think of polyamory, I think of potentially like there could be like a main couple, kind of like the couple that I was involved with. But even the guy who I was speaking to was like, I'm open to having a long-term relationship with you as well. And then, you know, then I got into thinking about some of the things you mentioned, Ken, where I'm like, well, if we all lived in the same, obviously we didn't live in the same area, but I'm like, if I were to relocate and we all lived in the same area and you were dating both me and this other woman, what happens if we have like a social engagement on the same night? Like, who do you accompany? You know, there's logistical things that
Mm.
you just don't really think about. And I guess you'd have to work out a compromise, right? Like you go with one person one time and the next time that happens, the other person wins or whatever, you know. It might come down to the situation and maybe one person is more comfortable going alone than the other. I don't know. But I thought about that and I'm like, there are just some logistical, I think, things that would come into play if you're dating really two people at once very significantly. But that's kind of what I think of more of as polyamory. Or polyamory, for instance, could be, I said like a throuple earlier. I don't know if that's like a term a lot of people use, but it could be like three people all in a couple or four, you know. These are all things that actually happen. And it comes back to what I said earlier. I just think it's so interesting that nobody talks about this. And these are like healthy relationships that do exist, and there's no education around it. So I think actually a lot of people, they stumble into it most of the time, I think, by cheating. It's like they have this pull to be with somebody else, and they don't really understand why. They act on it, and then they feel horrible for cheating. But it's like, really, if they were educated about polyamory, if everyone were educated about polyamory, maybe they would have felt comfortable actually having a conversation with their partner and saying, I'm having feelings for someone else. And it's true, maybe the partner wouldn't be okay with that because they may not be open to an open relationship or to polyamory. But I think if there were more education around this as a whole, it would be something that would really help with like the cheating epidemic in the entire world, and I just think like we're remiss that we don't talk about this in schools or in any form of education. It's very hard for people to find this information. Even someone like me who is a dating coach, like this is something that only really got onto my radar in the last couple of years, only because I happened to meet someone who was part of that kind of community. So I just think it's just really important to have these conversations and really like raise the collective consciousness about like these alternative lifestyles, and that they're not something to shun or to, it may not be for you, but that doesn't mean that it's not for somebody else. And I think that's a really important point. Like, it's just figuring out, does it work for you? And if it doesn't, that's fine. But I do think it's important to recognize that these are very real relationships, and there's really nothing wrong with them if the people engaging in them are being honest and healthy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that, it all boils down to communication, which I know I feel like a bit of a hand-waving gesture to say, but I think that, there's a level of self-awareness and communication that goes with this. I feel like it's one thing to just, to say, oh, I like the idea of being in an open relationship, to actually being in one. Because each of these, even with friends with benefits, long-term relationships, they all have foundational differences. And I think with open relationships, the thing that really, I think people often use the whole thing like, oh, what if one of us gets jealous? You're not going to get jealous. It doesn't work like that. Like, if there is jealousy, then that individual needs to work through themselves and go, well, what's the reason I feel like, what's the reason that I'm feeling this way? And it might even be because they're not getting enough attention, as you mentioned earlier, from the partner that they want to spend the time with. And that's fine, but they need to be honest and say, well, look, I would much rather be, with one person. Now, going back to what I was hearing about, the cheating epidemic, I agree with that. And look, I think that cheating is, I want to address that by saying, like, it is definitely something that hurts and scars so many individuals across different levels. And I think that whilst there is cheating can be, categorized, as entitlement, as something where, the foundations of the relationship weren't working, and then, cheating was the result of that. Like, it's not usually the cheating that was the depth of the relationship. It was something way before that contributed to the cheating, so to speak. But in the case of polyamory and that sort of thing too, I think that, the way we're brought up, the way we're conditioned, as you were saying, is that, monogamous relationship, it can only be a man and a woman, blah, 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 and it can only be, this particular dynamic, or a guy and a guy, or a girl and a girl. But I think I think the problem is that it doesn't take into consideration mentally where we're at in life, the kind of love that we actually want for ourselves and we're comfortable with. And so as a consequence, when cheating does occur for one reason or another, let's just say it's not the entitlement route, it's not because needs weren't being met in the relationship due to, emotional reasons. Let's just say it was pure fact that, one individual just happens to have a lot of love to give, and they have a lot of, they need to have a lot of stuff going on, then it's really hard in that circumstance to actually, they're not going to necessarily feel like they're not necessarily going to feel happy within themselves in that relationship if they want more than what they've got.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why this is a topic that is like very near and dear to me is it's something that I'm trying to figure out for myself. Like I said, I had two relationships. One was more successful than the other in terms of polyamory. But even when I think back beyond that, before that, I was with a boyfriend for a long time, like over 4 years, and I. I don't know if you're into personality tests. Myers-Briggs, or 16 personalities. I text as an extrovert. So a lot of people describe me as very bubbly. I'm very friendly. Like everywhere I go, I'm talking to people. And because of that, I connect with a lot of people and I do get hit on a lot. And it's like, and I think it's because I'm just perceived as somebody who's very open, who's very warm. And I remember being in this relationship, and it was such a healthy relationship. Like, we are still friends to this day. I love this guy dearly. When we were together, it was amazing. We just had different long-term goals. That's why it ended. But the relationship itself was very healthy. I was very happy. I was very fulfilled. There was really nothing missing. However, sometimes when I was out and I connected with people, and I never cheated. However, there were many times where I actually felt like resentment, or I felt like frustration that I couldn't really act on something that I felt with somebody else. And that didn't mean that I didn't love my partner. I absolutely did. That didn't mean that anything was lacking. It totally wasn't. I just really liked this stranger that I met, and I really wanted to get to know them more. And I knew that it was going to hurt my partner if I did, and that held me back from doing it. But I still felt a frustration because I wanted to do that. And I guess when I think about my future, I'm a little unconventional. I don't want to get married or have children. So I think when I think about polyamory, I'm like, maybe it makes sense for me because I think there's so many amazing people in this world that I don't necessarily feel that I want to spend the rest of my life with one. I kind of like the idea of having a lot of opportunities and a lot of different people. And I think even if I find one that makes me super happy for the rest of my life and I do want to stay with them, I don't necessarily want to be closed off to others, you know? So I think like there is something
Mm.
within me that is drawn to polyamory. And even though I struggle with like human ego with like the most recent relationship I was in where I was kind of like, no, I don't want him to talk to other people. When I think about what I want, I actually do want to talk to other people. And it's not really fair for me to say, well, I should do it and you shouldn't, you know? So it's like I have to
Mm.
kind of grapple with that where am I okay? Can I face my own ego and say, if I want to be open and talk to other people, I have to allow my partner to do that as well. Can I handle that, or is that going to cause me too much pain? Where it's better for me to say the relationship is healthy. One healthy relationship is enough, and I need to be happy with that. Or I want to be free to explore and have these other experiences, and therefore I need to allow my partner that same space. You know?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. I completely agree. I guess taking all this into consideration, we've touched a lot on mindset, the right kind of mindset you need to be in this open relationship if you are, testing to see if you are a polyamorous individual and whether this would work. You know, I guess as a final question for our audience is, what would you say to someone who is looking to start this experience? They're interested to know whether or not they are actually A, polyamorous, and B, suited for an open relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to be honest from day one. I know I was telling you this, Ken, that I just started seeing someone. It's not like exclusive yet. We just met. We've gone on a couple of dates, and we met on a dating app. And I had written on one of the compatibility questions. The question was, would you ever consider an open relationship? And my answer was yes, if my partner were reliable. And he asked me about it, and he was like, "Are you looking for an open relationship, or are you looking for something monogamous? Where is your mind at? Because I saw your answer to that question." And I really respected that he asked me that. Because I never want to fool anyone. I never want to be fooled by anybody. I think especially when you're talking about being open, it's very important to lead with that. Even if you're not sure, it's important to talk about that and say, this is something that has been on my mind. And if you're asking me what I'm looking for in a relationship, or, before we embark on a relationship, we need to discuss what our relationship goals are. And this is kind of the journey that I'm on, and this is where my head is at. And I think I may be somebody that at some point wants to try an open relationship. Is that something that you would be interested in? And I really think your gut will tell you, because before my most recent relationship with this polyamorous guy, I was really thinking, I think I want to try a polyamorous relationship. And I went on a date with a guy before him who was like, absolutely not. I would never have an open relationship. And I immediately felt myself shut down, where I was like, no, I don't want to go out with this guy again, because I could feel in my heart that the next thing I wanted to do was try a polyamorous relationship. So I think in the moment, if you have that conversation, you're going to know what you want to do, even if you're kind of unsure right now. And that person is going to know. They're going to have a gut reaction to that of like, oh no, that's not for me. Or, you know what? That's really interesting. That's something that I might be looking to explore as well. I think I really want to go back to what you started off saying in this whole live, Ken, which is you need to be very intentional with your dating profile. I think absolutely
Mm.
as a marketer, I really believe in CTAs, calls to action, and I absolutely love to tell my clients to include something in their profile that says, message me if, or you should message me if, and tell people exactly what you're looking for and tell them to message you if they fit a certain set of criteria because you can't be clearer, right? So if the person reading that is
Right.
going, oh my God, this is totally me. They want somebody like me to message them. They're like, there's like a little bell in their head that's going to go off and go like, ding, 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 ding. This is the person I'm supposed to message. And look, they want me to message them. They're going to reply, you
Mm.
know? So it helps a lot if you include a section like that. And I think, if that's something that you're looking for, then that's something that you should make evident on your profile. That
Yeah,
way
I
you're not
completely
going to
agree.
blindside anyone and you're going to attract the kind of people that you're looking for.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Laura. I think that it's the right approach. I mean, look, I can only echo from a marketer's point of view the importance of having that kind of information there too. I remember when I did friends benefits, that was the first thing I wrote on my profile too. And I even reiterated it when I was chatting with people, both online and offline, to be like, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. And it's good too, because some people won't get the memo. You've got to then filter it out, like classic tale of our lives. People say that they're interested. It's like, are you actually interested in what I'm offering here? And it's and I think it's really important to actually have that first date to then really validate. God, I sound like such a marketer. To really test to see whether the person's actually on the same page as you, because if they're not, then you're wasting both people's time. And I know for a fact that if part of this involves intimacy, which includes sex and other things like that too, it's just going to be ruined if you're with someone who's not on the same page as you. Because, as you mentioned, your gut is your biggest indicator as to whether or not, this is something you ultimately want to do. But I think the one thing I would say to people is if they're curious, just give it a go. Just try, but be intentional about it, as you said too. Don't wishy-washy like dates, mates, anything nice. Because that's just like, I had this chat with a guy recently who said to me that was asking like, oh, is it common to be, asking, oh, I'm just looking for dates, mates, friends, blah, 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 blah. And I said, it's not so much that it's common, it's just that it's indecisive. It's like the person you go to meet and you're like, what do you want to do for lunch? I'm like, oh, I could go for KFC. I could go for McDonald's. Maybe I just want a coffee. I don't know. What do you feel like? And you're like, mate, I just want an omelet. Like, I don't, I'm not interested in beating around the bush. So I think because there is this whole like, oh, don't be needy, attitude, people are afraid to actually express what they're looking for. And I think a consequence of which is that people just get strung along. They go along with all these things, including open relationships, which they're not ready for, they're not prepared for mentally, and they just do it because they think this is the only way to be in some form of relationship, and they feel like, oh, I'm now validated. I'm now, feeling good about myself. I am worthy. So I'd say that, while the conversation might go on for a lot longer, the one thing I would say is to summarize what I'm getting at is you want to do it, just be intentional about it, as you mentioned, just be very clear from day one and do it. Other than that, Laura, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, you can find me here on Instagram. My handle is at kissed and dismissed, just all spelled out, no spaces, no underscores. There's a link there to get on my email list. So if you want to stay in touch, click the link in my bio. You can get on my email list. You'll get all my free tips and tricks. I also have a website, kissanddismiss.com. You're welcome to check me out there as well. Or just send me a DM if you have a question specific to online dating or anything like that. Always happy to help.
Amazing. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this topic, because it is definitely a controversial one, but it is also something that I think a lot of people actually need to talk about, because the reality is, controversial or not, a lot of us do actually like the idea of having more than one long-term lover, and even if it's in the same space, that you're occupying with someone else, I think it's just healthy to actually get a gist as to what that actually means.
Yeah, I loved what you said earlier about like maybe someone just has so much love to give. I think that's true. Some people do. They want to love more than one person,
Mm.
and I think that's beautiful. So I agree.
Yeah,
Let's
I
leave
agree.
it. I think it's a great note to end on.
Yeah, I completely agree. Laura, you have an amazing evening. Thank you so much for hopping on and doing this with me. I really enjoyed it. And I wish you very well with all that you're doing. And I'm sure we'll be chatting going forward with a lot of other things too.
Totally agree. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Take care now.
Bye.